People like you do not carry $5 million. She said it to his face. Then she tore the check in half at the counter. Once, twice, threw the pieces at his chest. He did not flinch. You just made the most expensive mistake of your life. Get out before I call security. He bent, folded a torn corner into his palm. Call them. And tell them to bring your boss, too. She laughed. In 4 minutes, she would not be laughing. In 4 minutes, the woman who ran the Low Country would walk through the door of Meridian Trust, look at him, and call him sir. Everett Ainsley did not leave. He stood with his palms on the marble counter of Meridian Trust on Broad Street and waited. He did not fill the silence. Behind him, 6 customers pretended to read pamphlets they had already read. The line had stopped moving. Outside, the afternoon light came in slow and yellow, the kind Charleston kept for October. The bank manager did not leave the counter either. She wanted him to walk out first. That was the arithmetic she had built her afternoon on. If he walked out, it was a story about a strange man with a fake check. If she walked away, it was something else. 3 minutes. 2 windows down, a teller named Marla Denning, who had worked this branch for 22 years, kept her hands folded on the deposit slips in front of her. She had watched this manager work a counter for 4 years. She had learned the shape of what came next, and the shape of what did not. 4 minutes. The front door opened. A woman walked in the way people walk when the room already belongs to them. She was not tall. She did not raise her voice. She moved past the customers, past the roped stanchions, and stopped at the edge of the counter with her eyes on the marble floor. 3 pieces of the torn check lay near the base of the counter. A blue ink signature cut across 2 of them. She looked up. She looked at Everett. She looked at the manager. Sir, Mr. Ainsley, I am very sorry for what just happened at a branch of Meridian Trust. For 3 seconds, nothing on the manager's face changed. Then it changed all at once. The color went out of her cheeks the way heat leaves a stone. Her hand on the counter closed on nothing. Everett did not look at her. He bent, picked up the 2 largest pieces of the check, folded them once against his palm, and slid them into the breast pocket of his flannel shirt. I'm going to step outside, he said. My daughter is waiting in the truck. The door chimed as he left. The woman turned to the manager. Her voice was different now. My office, the back conference room. Now, inside, the manager did not sit. The check looked fraudulent, she said. The routing sequence was non-standard. I acted within my authority. Did you run the routing through the system before you tore it? The manager did not answer. Camille Ashford opened her laptop, entered her credentials, and typed the name. Ainsley Family Trust. Priority 1. Board confidential. She closed the laptop. She breathed out, very slowly. Outside, across Broad Street, Everett Ainsley sat in the driver's seat of a Ford F-150 older than the newest teller in the bank. His daughter Sadie, 8, was reading a paperback in the passenger's seat, feet tucked under her. He put both hands on the wheel. He did not turn the key for almost a minute. Was the bank okay, Dad? Tomorrow will be better. She nodded. She had heard that answer before. Camille spent that night in the East Bay Street office reading ownership records. Meridian Trust Holdings was Delaware registered, with 3 intermediary LLCs stacked above it and 2 below. The chain looked deliberately quiet. It ended in a Wilmington-registered limited partnership. Ainsley Capital Partners, LP, 61% of the parent. General partner listed on the last page. Everett H. Ainsley. She read it twice. She read it a 3rd time to be sure of what she was reading. Then she sat at her desk with the light off, and the harbor beyond her window going dark, and she thought about the 2 hours during which her own institution had treated its own majority owner like a man committing fraud with paper. She did not feel satisfaction. She felt something closer to nausea. 61%, and a torn check on the marble floor of one of her branches, and a room of customers who had watched. She was in the gravel lot of Ainsley & Son by 7 the next morning. The boatyard sat on a quiet stretch of North Charleston, past the container terminal and the last of the industrial fence line. A hand-lettered sign, a wooden hull on stanchions, a small office with a single lit window. She parked next to the Ford truck. She had brought no lawyer, no briefcase, no business card. Everett was standing at a workbench with a rag in his hand, wiping engine grease off his knuckles. He looked up when she came in. He did not look surprised. "I did not come to offer compensation," she said. "You can ask for any form of redress you want, and I will enforce it. But I want to hear from you first, what you want to happen next." He set the rag down. He looked past her at the shape of a sailboat hull under a canvas tarp at the far end of the yard, then back at her. "I do not want Blythe Halloran to lose her job today because she tore up a check of mine. If she is fired for that reason, every other customer she has ever treated the way she treated me stays invisible. Leave her at that counter, but open a full audit of the branch, every flagged transaction, every delayed customer." 2 years back. Camille did not answer immediately. She had come with 3 prepared paths, and none of them had been that one. She nodded. Slowly. "That will take political capital I do not have a lot of. I understand. You are not asking me to make it easier." "No." She held his eyes a moment longer than she meant to. Then she nodded once more, professional again, and turned toward the door. She stopped in the frame. She looked back over her shoulder at the boat under the tarp. 42 feet, wooden hull, the mast unstepped and laid across sawhorses beside it. She could just read the name in faded gold letters on the transom. The boat out there. Constellation. Who does she belong to? He did not turn. He put the rag down on the bench, edge aligned, before he answered. "My wife." She did not ask when. She did not ask how. She said, "Thank you, Mr. Ainsley," and walked out. In the rearview mirror, backing out onto the 2-lane road, she saw a small girl in a red jacket run out from behind the office and wrap both arms around Everett's leg. He put a hand on top of her head without looking down. He was still watching the road where the car had been. Camille drove all the way back to East Bay Street with the radio off. That night, in her apartment, she opened a legal pad and wrote at the top of a fresh page, "Broad Street Branch. Audit. 2 years. Underneath she wrote, "Do not touch Halloran." Yet, Blythe Halloran understood immediately what was coming. That night she made 3 phone calls from her living room. The first was to Wentworth Price, who sat on the Meridian Trust Board and had been in her father's Porter God class of 1978. The second was to Barrett Lockhart, who sat on the same board and shared a pew and a vestry seat with her at St. Michael's on Broad. The third was to a name at the Chamber of Commerce, who owed her father a favor from before her father died. She told each of them the same version. A strange customer had come in with a $5 million check on a family trust that had never seen a transaction of that size come through the branch before. The routing looked hand-altered. She had exercised her professional judgment in a moment that required it, and now a regional VP with a reputation for career ambition was moving to open a punitive audit at her branch as personal reprisal. She did not need to be right. She needed only to introduce enough doubt to make the audit slow down. The phone calls did what they were meant to do. Camille received the first call from Price at 7:40 the next morning, before she had reached the office. He used the word thoughtful 3 times. He used the phrase "before we expand this" once. He asked her to hold the audit's scope for a week while he made a few discreet conversations. She had lived inside the language of banking politics for 20 years. She heard every gear inside every sentence. She did not argue on the phone. She said, "I will consider it," and hung up, and drove the rest of the way into East Bay Street with both hands on the wheel. At her desk, she sat for a long time and thought about what Everett had said. Leave her at that counter. She had understood it the first time as restraint. She understood it now as strategy. Blythe Halloran was not going to change her behavior in the next 2 weeks. If she stayed at the counter, she would go on doing exactly what she had always done, and the audit would go on recording it, and by the end of the 2nd week the record would be its own argument. He had not asked Camille to make it easier. He had told her, without saying it, how to make it inevitable. That evening, at a corner table at Poogan's porch on Queen Street, Everett cut a piece of fish and slid it onto his daughter's plate. "Dad," Sadie said, "who was the woman at the shop today?" "Someone who works very carefully. Do you think she is nice?" He set his fork down. He thought about the answer honestly for a moment. "I think she is honest," he said. "I think that is the closest thing to nice I know how to trust." Sadie considered this and cut into her fish. Late that night, in the office above the boatyard, Everett opened his laptop and wrote an email to Preston Halliday, his trust attorney in Wilmington. 2 lines. "Have a forensic accountant on standby. Do not activate." He did not send it as a threat. He sent it as inventory. He had learned in the last 5 years That discipline was not the absence of weapons. It was the refusal to draw them one moment before they were needed. The next afternoon, a courier delivered a small bottle of Charleston distilled whiskey to Camille Ashford's office. The note tucked under the ribbon was handwritten, unsigned, 3 words. For when needed, she recognized the handwriting from a folded scrap in her desk drawer, torn along a diagonal, blue ink cutting across an old signature. She put the bottle in the bottom drawer and did not open it. Camille started the audit quietly. She pulled 2 analysts she trusted, Nora Beckwith and Devin Ruiz, into a small windowless room on the 4th floor of East Bay Street and gave them exactly what they needed. 3 years of transaction logs from the Broad Street branch, filtered by manager override flags. She did not tell them what she expected to find. She told them to sort chronologically and look for pattern. 3 days in, Devin printed a page and slid it across the table. The pattern was there. It was not a single fraudulent transaction. It was something quieter, and, in its own way, worse. The manager at Broad Street had a habit. The habit was to flag high-value or high-urgency transactions belonging to a particular kind of customer. A contractor with a callus on the ring finger side of his left hand, a landscaper who spoke with a Georgia drawl and not a Charleston one, a mechanic in a canvas jacket, a woman in scrubs paying off her mother's estate. The flags produced a 72-hour verification hold that had never been reported upstream. Every hold had eventually cleared. Every customer had eventually been paid, but the delay had been the punishment, and no one had ever recorded that it was one. Camille read for 2 hours without moving. Then she got in her car and drove north. Sadie was on the stone steps of the boatyard office when Camille pulled in. She had the same paperback as before. She had 40 pages left. She looked up. "Hi, Miss Ashford." "Hello, Sadie." Everett came around the side of the office, wiping his hands. He gestured her in. He did not ask what she wanted. He assumed she had a reason. She set 2 thick folders on the workbench. "I need more time. The board is pressing." "How much do you have?" "Maybe 2 weeks." He nodded. Then he said, without looking at the folders, "If I gave you the name of a forensic accountant who was already retained and ready, would you use him?" She was quiet for a long time. "If I accepted, it would go into the record that I was assisted by a majority shareholder in a matter that involves an active branch investigation. That is a career-ending line. It is also the line the board would use to disqualify the entire audit." He picked the folders up and pushed them back across the bench toward her, closed. "Then I did not offer," he said. "You do it your way." She looked at him, not with gratitude, but with a slow, precise recognition. It was the first time in a very long time that a man with more power than she had had failed to use it against her. "Dad?" Sadie's voice at the doorway. "I finished the book." "That was fast," Everett said. He turned. "Come here. This is Miss Ashford. She works at the bank." Sadie stood in the doorway a moment. She looked at Camille the way children look at grown-ups when they are gathering information without being noticed doing it. "Did the bank tear up Dad's check?" Camille went still for half a second. She had not prepared for this. She crouched down until her eyes were level with the girl's. "Not anymore." Sadie considered that. She said, "Okay," and disappeared back around the office toward the sailboat under the tarp. Camille stood up. She picked the folders off the bench. She said, "Thank you, Mr. Ainsley," again, the way she had at the door the last time, and drove back down toward East Bay Street, with both hands on the wheel, and a decision she had not yet named forming in her chest. The board met at East Bay Street 3 days later. Not formally. There was no minute taker in the room. There was Camille at the head of the table, Wentworth Price and Barrett Lockhart down one side, 2 other members on the other side, and a 5th member on the phone from a golf cart in Kiowa. "The concern," Price said, "is proportionality. A single manager, a single incident, a wide audit. It reads as reprisal. It also opens the branch's reputation to unnecessary risk." "Reputation," Camille repeated. "Yes." She opened her laptop. She turned the screen so all 4 men in the room and the man on the phone could see it. She walked them through 4 transactions, in order. The first was a contractor named Ellis Warren, whose daughter had been scheduled for a hip surgery at MUSC in April of the previous year, and whose insurance reimbursement had been flagged and delayed the 72 hours it took to shift the surgery from a Tuesday to a Friday. The second was a widow named Ruth Devereaux, whose late husband's veteran's death benefit had been flagged for verification and delayed past the funeral home's payment deadline. The third and fourth were smaller. She did not need them to make her point. "If you would like me to close this audit at this stage," she said quietly, "I will document that decision in a memo, request a signed acknowledgement from each of you, and forward the file to legal counsel for records retention." Price did not answer immediately. Barrett Lockhart looked at his hands. "That will not be necessary," Price said. "Continue." Carefully. She did not thank him. Late that afternoon, on the way home to her apartment on Meeting Street, she took a detour. She did not know she was going to take it until she was already turning onto Concord and coming up on the water. She parked at City Marina and walked out onto the docks. At the end of Dock D, she saw them. They were kneeling on a low pontoon beside a sailboat much smaller than the one under the tarp at the boatyard. 16 feet, wooden, unfinished. Everett was working a piece of steel wool along the strake by the waterline. Sadie was, more approximately, doing the same thing beside him. Sadie saw her first. The girl stood up and waved with the steel wool still in her hand. "Miss Ashford." Camille walked out. Everett looked up. He nodded once and went back to the strake. "This is Kestrel," Sadie said, taking her hand. "Dad is building her for me." Camille did not ask any of the questions she wanted to ask. She stood a few steps back on the pontoon and watched them work. Sadie described the wood, the shape, which board went where, and why the seam had to be perfect before the caulk went in. Everett did not narrate over the girl. He worked quietly. He did not look up at Camille again for 15 minutes. The light dropped. "We should go," Camille said finally. Sadie hugged her around the hip, and then ran ahead down the pontoon toward the marina office. At the top of the ramp, in the small gravel lot, Everett fell into step beside Camille for a moment. "Thank you for not closing the audit." She did not turn her head. "That was not for you." He nodded. "I know. Thank you for that too." They reached her car. He did not stand and watch her drive away. He turned back toward the ramp and toward the girl calling his name from the far end of it. Marla Denning came to the East Bay Street office at 6:45 on a Thursday evening. She did not have an appointment. She had a shoebox. She sat in the chair across from Camille without being invited to sit down. She set the box on the desk between them. It was an old Payless box, cardboard soft at the corners, the lid held on by 2 rubber bands. She did not open it. She looked at her hands for a long moment. "I have kept this for 22 years. Camille did not answer. Marla slid the rubber bands off. Inside were deposit slips, hundreds of them. Each one had been used in reverse, the customer side blank, with pencil handwriting on the back. A date, a name, a dollar amount, a phrase in quotation marks. The oldest slips were faded almost to nothing. The newest were from 3 weeks ago. "Every time she did it," Marla said, "I wrote down what she said in the room. Not what she wrote in the system, what she said out loud. So there would be a record even if the system did not keep one. So one day, if someone came, there would be something." Camille began to read. The phrases were mundane in isolation. In combination, they were a language. "Not our profile, not our kind of paperwork. This does not match the account history. He does not present as a legitimate signatory. She does not carry herself like the kind of customer we serve." Camille turned the slips backward through time, month by month. She stopped at June of 2023. The slip in her hand was dated June 14th. The customer name was Elena Ainsley. The amount was $78,000. The transaction purpose, written in the space at the top, vessel safety inspection, Constellation. Underneath, in the manager's language and Marla's handwriting, additional verification requested. The amount seems inconsistent with account history. 72-hour hold, Marla said quietly. She came back on the 3rd day. She got the money. She told me the trip on Saturday could not wait any longer. It was a family sailing weekend. 2 hours out of the harbor, a squall came through. The Coast Guard found the boat at first light. Only one of them came back. Camille closed her eyes. For 40 seconds, she did not open them. When she did, she reached across the desk and put the lid back on the box. She pressed the rubber bands into place with her thumb. "You will not tell anyone about this," she said, "until I say so. Not the board, not the compliance office, not Mr. Ainsley." Marla nodded. She did not ask why. She was a woman who had kept a shoebox in her kitchen cabinet for 22 years, next to a can of coffee. She understood the arithmetic of the right moment. At the door, she stopped. Her voice was different now, tired and small. "My son has cystic fibrosis," she said. "I could not lose the health plan. That is why I did not come sooner. I want you to know that. Not because it is an excuse. Because it is what happened." "I know," Camille said. The next morning, Camille drove north. Everett was standing outside the boatyard office with a mug of coffee. "There is something I need to show you," she said. "But you have to decide before I do. If you see this, we are not going backward from it." He put the mug down on the porch rail. He looked past her, towards Sadie, who was sitting on a stack of pallets by the fence painting a rock red with a small brush. "Show me." He read the slip. He did not cry. He did not raise his voice. He read it once through, all the way, and then he read it a second time, slower, and then he read it a third. 7 minutes. Camille did not interrupt. She stood with her back against the workbench with her arms crossed and did not look at him. He set the slip down flat on the bench, aligned with the edge of a steel ruler. "Elena waited 3 days," he said, "for the money, for the inspection. She went out on that Saturday without a signed safety report." Camille had nothing to say. There was nothing. He picked up his phone. He walked to the far end of the shop, past the tarp on the wooden hull, and made one call. She could hear only fragments of it. She heard him ask a single question. "If I take this public, how many times over the next 20 years will my daughter read her mother's name in a story about something that could have been prevented?" The answer, on the other end, was muffled. She heard him say, "Thank you, Preston." She heard him say, "Not yet." He walked back. He set the phone face down on the workbench next to the slip. "You will not use that file to put Blythe Halloran into the newspaper," he said. "You will use it inside the board. You will end her career with your authority, not with my scandal. Sadie will not learn the name of what happened to her mother from a headline about something that could have been prevented." Camille looked at him for a long time. She had spent 20 years in a business that mostly rewarded the drawn sword. She had seen fortunes made, careers ended, marriages destroyed by men who had considerably less reason to burn a building down than the man standing in front of her now with grease still in the creases of his knuckles. He had chosen not to burn it because of an 8-year-old. She did not tell him that she understood. She said, "Yes," she said more slowly. "If the board refuses, I will lose my position. If I lose my position, I will still bring it out." He nodded, one time. "I know." Marla came to the boatyard that afternoon. Everett met her at the fence line. He did not say anything for the first few seconds. He reached out and put one hand on her shoulder and let it stay there. He did not offer her money. He did not offer her a promotion. He said, "Thank you." She said, "Elena was good to me. I only gave back what I had." Sadie noticed something was different. She did not ask what. She stayed closer to her father than usual all afternoon. At bath time she said, from the tub, "Dad, is Miss Ashford a good person?" He was sitting on the tile floor with his back against the wall. "She is an honest one," he said. "I think that is the closest thing to good I know how to trust." Sadie considered this. She said, "Okay," and went back to her boat in the water. That night, after Sadie was asleep, Everett drove to City Marina alone. He walked out to the tarp-covered hull at the far end of Dock D. He climbed onto the deck of Constellation for the first time in 3 years. He did not repair anything. He did not sand anything. He sat down on the coaming with his back against the mast collar, and he put his hand flat on the teak of the port rail and left it there for a long time. He said, aloud, to no one who was on the boat with him, "I know now. It was not your fault." Somewhere out past the breakwater a channel bell rang once, and then again. The Meridian Trust Board convened in a private hearing at East Bay Street on a Tuesday at 10 in the morning. 9 members present. A stenographer in the corner. Blythe Halloran was there with her attorney, a Charleston lawyer named David Ainsley, no relation, gray-haired, in a navy suit that had been cut for him 20 years earlier, and still fit. Price and Lockhart sat on Blythe's side of the table. Camille presented for 40 minutes. She walked the board through the pattern. She used case numbers where names would be prejudicial and names where she wanted them prejudicial. Ellis Warren, Ruth Devereaux, 9 others. Marla Denning was in the room as a corroborating witness and spoke 3 times, once about a slip from 2018, once about a slip from 2021, once about the general practice of the branch during morning intake. She did not mention June 14th of 2023. Camille had promised that would stay out of the room. It stayed out of the room. Blythe's counsel argued professional judgment. Blythe herself spoke last. Her voice was still soft, still polite, still Charleston. "I protect this institution from risk," she said. "That is my job. If I misjudge a moment, that is a human being. It is not a pattern." At the 52nd minute, the door opened. Everett Ainsley walked in. He had not been invited. He was not on the schedule. He carried a single sheet of paper and set it, face up, on the polished mahogany of the table. Certified holding statement, Ainsley Capital Partners, LP, 61% of the outstanding shares of the parent company. Last updated 4 weeks ago. He did not sit at the head of the table. He sat at the far end. He crossed his arms. He did not say anything. For 20 seconds, no one in the room said anything either. Blythe Halloran looked at the sheet of paper. Then she looked at Everett Ainsley. For the first time in the 4 weeks since a torn check had lain on the marble floor of her branch, the polite composure on her face broke. It was not fear. It was the slower and heavier recognition of a person who understood, all at once, that she had read a room wrong, one time, and that one time was going to cost her every room after it. Price cleared his throat. He looked toward the chair. "I move," he said, "for the immediate termination of Miss Halloran, and for the opening of a region-wide audit of Low Country operations under the supervision of Miss Ashford." The chair called the vote. 7-2. Blythe was asked to leave the room. She did not look at Everett on her way out. He did not turn his head to watch her go. In the corridor outside the boardroom, 20 minutes later, Camille was standing near the tall window at the end of the hall with her hand flat against the marble sill. Everett came out. He did not stop walking exactly. He slowed as he passed her. "You did the right thing your way." She did not turn her head. "I could still lose my job for the way you walked in." "You won't. But if you do, I will buy the whole bank back and rehire you." She laughed. Once. It was the first time in 4 weeks. He kept walking. The audit expanded across the Low Country. 3 weeks in, 7 employees at 4 different branches were disciplined. 2 were quietly asked to resign. 14 customers received personal letters, printed on Meridian Trust letterhead, signed by Camille Ashford by hand. A permanent independent review protocol was installed at the Broad Street branch, with a compliance officer stationed on site 4 days a week, and a quarterly external audit written into the branch bylaws. Blythe Halloran was gone from Charleston in 2 months. She surfaced in Beaufort as an office manager at a small property and casualty insurance firm run by a cousin of her late father's. There was no press release. There was no story. There was no lawsuit. Nowhere, in any of the filings, did the name Elena Ainsley appear. That was what Everett had asked for. That was what he received. Marla Denning was promoted to Regional Compliance Officer. Her salary doubled. She refused a public announcement. She accepted, instead, a handwritten letter from Everett Ainsley, 4 sentences long, which she framed and set on the corner of her new desk. The frame was cheap. The letter was not. Everett returned to the boatyard. For the first time in 3 years, he called a rigger and a sailmaker and a hull specialist and scheduled the full refit of Constellation. He did not explain to any of them why the timing had changed. They did not ask. One evening at supper, Sadie set down her fork. "Dad, are we going to sail again?" He thought for a moment. "Yes. When you are ready." She thought about that. "I am ready if you go with me." He nodded, slowly. Camille Ashford did not come to the boatyard for 3 weeks. She did not need to be told why. He did not need to ask. There was an active audit under her name and a shareholder relationship at the center of it, and the discipline required to keep those 2 things clean was not a discipline either of them was willing to break. There was one message she sent him. On the Friday the audit closed. 3 words. "It's done." She thought for a moment about whether to add anything. She did not. He answered inside of 10 minutes. "Doc D. Saturday, 5 o'clock. Bring nothing. Sadie will be there." She read it twice. She put her phone face down on the counter. She stood for a while with her hand flat on the granite and the harbor going gold outside her window. Then she opened the bottom drawer of her desk, where she had put the small bottle of Charleston distilled whiskey 4 weeks earlier. She looked at it. She did not take it out. She closed the drawer. Saturday, City Marina, Late October afternoon. Constellation had been finished, sanded down to bare wood in July, refinished in September, launched off the yard trailer in the first week of October. She rode at her new mooring at the end of Dock D, 42 feet of ivory hull and honeyed teak trim, mast stepped, boom-bagged, halyards ticking softly against the spar in the shore breeze. Sadie was at the far end of the pontoon, tearing crusts of bread into gull-sized pieces and throwing them into the water. She was laughing at something the birds had done. Every so often she looked back over her shoulder at the two figures near the boat, and then she looked forward again. Camille walked down the ramp with nothing in her hands. She did not have a laptop. She did not have a briefcase. She did not have the East Bay Street building at her back or a title in front of her name. She was there as she was. Everett was sitting on the low combing of the cockpit, with his hands on his knees. He did not stand up when she reached the boat. He shifted 3 inches to his left, opening a place beside him on the combing, and looked out at the water. She sat down, 6 inches between them. Neither of them spoke for 2 minutes. Then he said, quietly, "Elena taught me that a boat did not need fixing if she was still floating. She was wrong. You fix her so she stops reminding you she once sank someone." Camille did not answer that. It was not a sentence that took an answer. She looked at Sadie throwing crusts at the gulls, and did not look at him. The light was moving. Charleston in late October kept a very particular light for the last 40 minutes before sundown, a slow yellow that went orange without seeming to change. The rigging clicked. A halyard pinged against the mast. "I do not know what this is," Everett said. "I do not want to name it." Camille answered without moving her eyes from the water. "Then do not name it." Sadie came running back down the pontoon and sat down between them on the combing with her legs swinging. She handed Camille a small piece of crust and Everett a smaller piece. "Feed the birds," she said. "They will not come to the boat if we do not feed them from the boat." They fed the birds. After a while, Camille stood up. She walked 3 steps toward the end of the pontoon, and then she stopped and turned around. Everett had stood too. He was watching her. She did not step forward. She held out her hand. He took it. Once, a short, firm grip. Held it. Let go. She walked back up the ramp toward the parking lot, and he watched her the whole way, and he did not call after her, and she did not look back. No one said anything. Dock D was already loud enough with the water on the pilings and the child laughing from the boat, and the last look the two of them had given each other before the sun touched the harbor. There are things a torn check cannot buy, and there are things that, when they have finally arrived at the right person, do not need a signature.